Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. I know that Gary was hoping she could also be here, but yeah, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time, and we're really excited about this. So please, everyone, welcome Gina Ferrara and Marc McFerren.
We're going to introduce each other, so I have the wonderful task of introducing. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I have the wonderful task of, it's not a task, it's a joy, to introduce Martha McFerren, who received an MFA from Warren Wilson College and is the author of 5 books, including Women in Cars, for which she received the Marianne Moore Prize, and Archaeology at Midnight. Her poems have appeared in the Georgia Review, Shenandoah, Southern Review, and many other journals and anthologies. She's the recipient of an Artist Fellowship in Literature by the Louisiana Arts Council, a Yaddo Fellowship, and a National Endowment, for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship. She lives in New Orleans with her husband, woodturner Dennis Wall. Please welcome Martha McFerren.
I am going to read from my new book, The McFerren Plot, and also new materials that I've written since then. But first, I want to start off by reading an older book poem from my book, Women in Cars. This is the title poem, Women in Cars. More women have done this than you'd imagine. You're out there driving back from Grand Saline or wherever they made something happen that particular Saturday. Actually, he's doing the driving and you're just sitting there twiddling with the radio. It's night on a 2-lane blacktop. There's nobody in the state except the stuff that's been run over. And already your date is yelling, "Let's play like we're in England," and scooting over to the opposite lane every 10 minutes or so. And you are so terribly bored. So you start taking off your clothes, starting with your shoes, then your earrings, then your shirt and bra. Getting out of your blue jeans isn't easy. You have to hoist your rump and buck forward with your knees, like you're doing the limbo. But let's admit it, climbing out of jeans in cars is a native art. When I was driving with a boy named Frank Fallis, I even whipped off my phony ponytail and threw it in the back seat, and he screamed, "Ah!" and skidded off the road. And then he said, really sarcastic, "You got anything else unnatural?" You can ride hours like that with the wind and the bugs blowing all over you and some Wilson Pickett. If you go through a place like Schofield or La Tuna, you don't even need to duck. They're all in bed with their shades down, dreaming about rain. There is simply nothing out there. Some people say Texans think more about wheels than sex, but you have to understand the distances involved.
Mm-hmm.
This book, McFerren Plot, is the 6th book. So I decided to evaluate my situation as far as the books go. And this is called Slender Volumes. I've measured with the seam gauge from my sewing box. It seems I've written exactly 1 3/4 inches of poetry. 6 slender volumes. After her 3 babies, Scarlett O'Hara gained 1 3/4 inches in her stem-like waist and totally freaked. To her, it was excessive, but I'll admit it's tiny beside the warehouse dealerships of Dickens, Stephen King, or Henry James. We poets lead concentrated lives. Gail Barton, who condensed meat and milk, might have loved us if he'd noticed. Most people don't. Even the ones who read stroll past my booth at conferences, not caring that I squeezed into my work Greece, Japan, the decent parts of Texas, moments of bloody violence, Brussels sprouts, the Anglo-American folk canon, Ireland, and assorted chunks of the Golden Mouth. Negative capabilities overrated. I managed to impose my will on 1 3/4 inches of the universe, without yet writing anything about dread or antimatter. In my time left, I might assert myself a full 2 inches. And while coming to those conclusions, I found myself writing a villanelle on the same topic, writing poetry, called Nothing Helps. Poetry is inherently unsure. I write because it's all that I can do. At times I hope the chocolate's secure. Though nothing sweetens what I still endure, trying to make a mess of lines sound new. Since poetry is inherently unsure, I'll never be financially secure or even loved by many. I'm just screwed. I only hope the chocolate's secure. I even long sometimes to be immured in dusty textbooks and obscure reviews. Poetry is inherently unsure. It mutates rapidly. It's never pure. You're never satisfied and never through. Then I pray that chocolate's secure. The goddamn stuff still has its own allure, much like the thread that's said to run so true. Yet poetry is inherently unsure, a malady that chocolate won't cure. This is a villanelle. I was taken to writing villanelles, and I ought to stop it because they're so limited, really. But nevertheless, I wrote this one that's in the book, called There, Not There. I viewed him as a personal attack, the boy who died when he was 6 months old. Would they have traded me to get him back? My uncle said they called him Little Mac, this brother whose existence left me cold. I viewed him as a personal attack. His early absence left me little slack. I was the one they pushed to meet their goals. Would they have traded me to get him back? He might have taken some of Mama's flack and maybe made her ease her crazy hold. I viewed him as a personal attack. I wouldn't let my parents even speak about their son, and little could be told, but they have traded me to get him back. He might have offered everything I lacked, my older brother who was never old. I viewed him as a personal attack. They might have traded me to get him back. And I wrote this. Still in a frustrated mood. It's called Martha Is Not a Romantic Name. My mother named me for Martha Cup, a preacher's wife way out in the country. Already older, she soon died graciously. Martha is an old woman's name. In the past, the boss's sheltered wife, plump and white-haired, was invariably a Martha. It's a white-haired name, an ultimate wasp name. It so happens there's a whole vineyard full of them. So tasteful, their hair has little choice but to whiten like Mrs. Washington's. At least there's Martha Stewart, a blonde who's staying blonde. She's old now, too. A self-created Protestant, she rose to be a bountiful kneader of white bread, and when she wasn't collecting Dolton, committed crimes of a waspish exclusivity. Did she craft wreaths in minimum security? She loosened the concept of Marthadom. I've also given Martha a few thumps in my younger sex and violence persona. Enough with all that goddamn rectitude. But now I too grow old. There's an opera called Martha, but they don't say it much. The music is simply past its prime. This is another one from the book called It Happens Again. I'm hunkered down sweating in some brush edging the swamp, stunned by the dronings of perpetual gnats and midges nagging at my mouth, ears, eyes. On my left are berry bushes, mostly thorns, softened by humidity, and past them, oh, for fuck's sweet sake, people have installed a nuclear power plant, just like the one I saw in England down past Avebury. It freaked me then, and now here's another one on this nowhere Florida coast. And it does not belong here, and they have pissed me into prose. How do you rinse your mind with this fucking thing plunked in your way? Take a breath, McFerren. No meltdowns allowed while trying to waylay some serenity. But now only serenity may rise from willful ignorance. Shake the peyote rattle all you like today, but you remain in the shadow of events and the Goodyear blimp and those two fucking towers on our grass. This is one from the book two. It's about my college days. Called Why Did You Look at Me and Smirk that Friday evening at the Presbyterian Collegiate Outreach Coffee House, the Exit? They were always called the Exit, those places. Why did you smirk? You were leaning against the Westinghouse, with that lovely girl, Fleda Hamilton, leaning against you. And I didn't know you then. I only wondered what was in the fridge. My small open jar of marinated artichokes, which were a novelty, as was everything else. Sometimes I set the jar on my head, as if I had crowned myself with cool, trying to be interesting. I retrieved my artichokes after that smirk from you, whom I did not know at all then. I still don't get it. Why did you look at me and smirk? In the middle of I read a lot of things about my college life. In every book, I was going to have some college poems. This is East Texas Pastoral. The BBC is praising the Rococo. Watteau's great Cythera, a pastoral of that sweetly underestimated genre. Petal-cheeked young lovers in locales too beautiful for tears. All in pale hues, silken, powdered. It's the BBC's belief he couldn't paint that shallow Gallic surface without knowledge of a sorrow underneath. Such lovely clothes and melancholy faces. Surface and subsurface couldn't last. Love is so brief, even when forever. It brings to mind a moment in my past in Nacogdoches. I was barely 20. Green as a Granny Smith in cutting class, wasting Daddy's money and my time because I was too happy for a desk. The loving spoonfuls daydream in my head, and wearing foolish adolescent rompers, I bounced in sneakers carelessly across that pretty and obscure East Texas campus. So much in love, like Prospero's Miranda. "'Tis new to thee," her daddy gently said. "'Twas new to me as well, and well deserved. I needed love like candy. Though my head was bouncing with my unexamined plans, a whisper too sleeped in as instinct does. You'll never be more carefree in your life than you are now. That's true, I never was." Mind matters. In the book also. I have a second-rate mind. I'll admit it. When I was 19, I read Ulysses, hammering the words like nails through both thick eyeballs. Between each chapter, I'd read a novel about a girl frightened in a house. I'm hopeless at all languages and maths, Started War and Peace and gave it up, thinking, save me from weeping great-souled Russians. Didn't try Don Quixote, but who does? For 30 years, I've been postponing Jane Ellen Harrison's Themis. That book might have changed my life. For the better, I mean. Rather late now. A bit of Henry James, but no William. My friend Steve told me not to worry. Yeats, he said, had a second-rate mind. And I suppose Yeats did. All that time trying to photograph the ghost of a rose. Maud Gunn laughed. Willie is so silly. This comforts me a little. Now, this is a request. Jan Villarubia. Called the Raggedy Ann Suite. A long poem with some prose interspersions in it. Has a gloss at the beginning that says, books for children should contain nothing to cause fright, suggest fear, glorify mischief, excuse malice, or condone cruelty. Johnny Gruelle. What's left is sugar. Lots and lots of genuine sugar, the hard white stuff, sweetest fix ever. The books are absolutely full of it, like strudel crammed with berries. No one past 5 years old could love sugar and sugar alone. A child a smidgen older would demand at the very least a taste of fear and mischief. Maybe later a bite of malice. They'd have yet to realize genuine sugar can be cruel. 2. I didn't read these books for the cunning story, for the cunning rural forest creatures in their ill-fitting rural suits, living in fear of the big fat men and their bang guns, or the cunning wee fairies in their cunning frocks of embroidered petal and leaf, singing their cunning little ditties till you swatted them away like giggling confetti. Neither did I read the stories to learn the villains who reformed always, and then ate substantial rainbows of candy. I read Raggedy Ann for the candy and cupcakes and other edible delights, and all the bounties of tea rooms circa 1917. 3. Gruelle, an illustrator, found a faceless rag doll in her mother's attic and named it for the Raggedy Man and Little Orphan Annie. His daughter Marcella was already beginning to outgrow dolls, but Gruelle saw possibilities. 2 months after the doll was patented, Marcella died. 4. Sugar is the wickedest drug of all, breeding torment and decay. A great moral mystery, said one historian who wrote of sugarcane's arrival in the Indies, followed thereafter by the slave labor needed for intensive cultivation. 6 million died in boiling hell, refining a food we do not need. One that rots teeth, bloats the body, traffic jams the bloods of diabetics, entices cancer cells to snuggle up. An addiction cheaper than heroin. Some say sugars cause more misery. 5. I was a sickly child and spoiled, scrawny, no hips to support my French Del Evans cowgirl skirt. My desperate mama let her sugar baby eat anything I'd eat. The wicked nutritionists who prowl these days, Puritans at heart, would have hauled mama in for child endangerment, then confiscated all my Oreos, making a foolish, piddling attempt to comfort me with apples. No, thank you. No decent little piggy would accept mere fruit. Sugar, indecent sugar, is the food of the unsophisticated, both children and raggedy dolls. Even Anne's heart was candy. A conversation lozenge reading "I love you" lay safe in her cotton breast. In the deep, deep woods, everything had flavor. Trees were heavy with candy-covered cookies. Cream puffs grew on bushes. Ladyfingers sprouted like irises. There were, as you'd expect, lemonade springs and soda water fountains. The cunning birds were tea cakes. Puddles of vibrant ice cream bubbled from the sweet earth. There were pickle bushes, too, and brambles where wild weenies strained to hop loose, yelping. But mostly it was tarts and pies, with never a tummy ache or feeling of nauseating surfeit. I wondered how the Raggeties, with their stitchery mouths, managed to eat the goodies without corrupting the pure fluffy cotton of their innards. Did they shit chocolate? 7. I dreamed of platonic Raggeties. Flawless Anne and Andy, auburn yarn as loops of hair, not raw red. Never a too large blocky head or short-limbed under-padded body. A long hanky tucked into the pocket of Anne's crisp apron. And inside her cottony self, a true candy heart, heartbreakingly perfect. Not available for normal money now. I've seen a Marcella, actually. A limited edition, pale-haired, ethereal, and holding in her arms 2 miniature rag dolls. All fantasy. 8. The child must have loved toffee and bright cookies. Why else endow her afterlife with strawberry soda water, crumbly crusted jam tarts, and sugar-addicted floppy dolls? 2 dolls she never played with, except in the pages of those sappy elderly volumes. Don't read these stories to your little appetite. If you don't want to send them into the deep, deep woods, salivating for gingerbread, searching for the cookie children, living in a little strawberry with savagery in their mouths. Think before you show them the particulars of that sweetness. First, with its everlasting indulgence for a sweet dead daughter. And this one is anger, unaccompanied by piano. Piano lessons were imposed on me. I could not grok what I was playing. Not a whimper of instinct stirred. Daddy, who had the depth of a crate, would listen to my churning exercises. If you can play, he told me, fleeing, you'll be popular at parties. But my mother had me miss an hour of my birthday party to take a lesson. Eating my late cake, I glared at Mama, who said, "One day you'll thank me." The punchline of an old motherful joke. In scratchy tool, I hammered trauma ride. Music never craved to leave my fingers and fall as simply as gravity to a keyboard. If your health breaks, Mama told me, you can always teach piano in your home. Joy, a chance to pass on my ineptitude while coughing like Tallulah at Camille. In all my years since, I've never been to a party also attended by a piano. But that's irrelevant. I am Scotch-Irish and know how to really hold a grudge. And consequently, logically, I believe my mother had a grudge against me. And this last one I'll read. It's a statue in the Faroe Islands, the little town of Miklavalur. It's a seal woman. The title is Kopakonen, which is Faroese dialect for seal wife. They have her down by the water's edge up on the rock island. When the water comes in at high tide, it goes all around her. And sometimes if a storm blows up, it really blows all around her. It's made of bronze, but they put some stainless steel in it too to help it hold up against the elements. She's removed her fur with its thick, fatty lining. Is now standing naked. Seal self discarded, flocks in thick folds for one hand. Whiskery face, blind, empty, goes sliding down bronze thigh as she steps out of animal. Sculpted nipples, newly aroused by metamorphosis. So curious to learn what happens between two legs. Seen from the high island is small on a chunk of rock, with icy thick wild waters slamming all over her. Alive, human, isolate, but not at all cold. Okay. Now I get to do Gina. Gina Ferrara lives in New Orleans and teaches English and writing at Delgado Community College, where she is an associate professor. Her poetry collections include The Size of Sparrows, Ethereal Avalanche, Amber Porch Light, Carville and Moss and Resurrection Fern, and Fitting the Sixth Finger. Her work has appeared in Callaloo, the Tar River Review, the Poetry Ireland Review, and others. She is an Elizabeth George Foundation grant recipient, and she curates the Poetry Buffet, a monthly reading series held at the latter branch of the New Orleans Public Library, and lately, because of the COVID-19, on Zoom, and we've got people from all over the country tuning in for that. So this is Gina Ferrara.
Thanks, everybody. I want to thank Blue Cypress for hosting this event. It's so great to actually not be on a screen, you know, not appearing like you're on Hollywood Square. So thank you to Blue Cypress, and thanks to Martha for asking me to read tonight, and thank you all for being here. So thanks. I'm going to start by reading from my book, which had the dubious distinction of coming out in March of 2020. It came out the week that we went into lockdown. And I was like, great, books now. So this book is really, I don't know that it's ripe. I think it's beginning to ferment because it's a little old. But it's definitely a late bloomer. So I'll say that about it. I think a lot of the poems in the book are, many are about my mother. Many are about New Orleans and kind of how I feel sometimes that New Orleans is on the verge of being wiped out geographically, and how the culture in New Orleans is really changing and shifting, which is hard for somebody who's from New Orleans to see. And I think the poems too are also about women, kind of maybe looking for, it's about them. So that I would kind of classify the poems that way. So the first poem that I'm going to read is after my mother passed away. My sister, who's here, my sister and I, we were going through my mother's things, and we determined that she had just the largest collection of lipstick that anyone could possibly have. And so this is a poem about that. It's called Her Mauve Palette. From pink camellia frost to sun-splendid plum, amaranth lotuses afloat in placidity, those preferential shades, waxy solids, never garish or patriotic red, coral remained relegated to deep water reefs. My mother didn't line her lips to form the perfect bow or prevent color from bleeding with sudden smiles or grimaces. The impact of her mauve palette in the uppermost vanity drawer, each tube upright, encased, measured longer than a rifle's bullets, ready for application and wear, always with the smallest counterclockwise twist. And then this is a kind of another poem, a different take on lipstick, applied. It is dark. You are unable to see the cloudy mirror. A troubled lagoon makes it worse. The lipstick, unsteadily applied in shakes and quivers, smears, not a description or a noun. No, this is a verb, all movement that bleeds tropical, a pride of Barbados, a hand-sized hibiscus across your lips, marking them as reckless, to give kisses, to retort or purse. You could use some parchment, a tissue to block the hemorrhage, this glide of paraben and balm, beyond glib, that comes from a tube with its counterclockwise twist, sharing the motion of the next storm. And this one, Ode to the Indigenous. After the city slipped and became a wound without a tourniquet, bleeding old with the new, no one knew. The treasures like the indigenous where the crepe myrtles grew from south to north, the magenta, lavender, pink, and white in tandem, and clustered, looking bleach-barked, barely bending towards the lake. Summer, the scent of brine, and the bridge lights illuminated, smaller than pinpricks in shades of amber, for 25 miles before the horizon. The point with the darkened lighthouse, splashy staccatos, jagged rocks breaking waves, the big tree in the park just beyond the labyrinth, the bend in the distance where we sat watching vessels pass with faded letters and foreign flags, tankers carrying barrels and grain flanked by tugboats. How the cicadas signaled the start of imminent Augusts and Septembers without being seen from the apexes of oaks. So my husband Jonathan used to be a really heavy smoker. He is no longer a smoker, but when he smoked, we would often leave the house kind of late at night and would walk to get cigarettes. And so this is kind of about an encounter that we had one night. It's called The Turtle. We leave before the late news to get cigarettes and milk. Crossing to walk on the levee, we spot a turtle stuck as a Pontiac with an oil leak in the middle of the road. Cars could come from either direction. The hissing turtle is not pleased when we scoop and run with it, a ticking bomb away from the manicured lawns with rotary daisies, white and fantastical in moonlight. The turtle, round as a green grape in Eden, leaves the sloping banks, bobs, follows the current, then disappears into unfathomable depths of russet water named for a zealot saint. And then kind of another poem where Bayou St. John is a part of the poem. This is called Where the Weeds Were Higher. We crossed the wide plank bridge where the reeds were higher. I spotted your father's Navy sedan, parked with its tidy interior and white walls. I started to wave, then stopped. You were examining the bearded irises, mottled purple and white, some scant yellow, close to the water. The woman wasn't your mother. His hands held her head at the nape, caressing her crown, platinum locks slipping, cascading between and over his fingers. Your father had no beard. His face smooth and shaven, brushed with scented talc. Earlier that morning I suspected you did not. I pointed to a papery white egret taking flight, legs looking like they'd snap, as your father turned the key and drove along the road that curved, snake-like, away from city limits. This is a poem about my parents. It's called History. Maybe it was the Spitfire or Triumph, the barely yellow or white car, something imported, bucket seats with a shift and loaf-sized hump between driver and passenger, bar in place, the heavy vinyl affixed, protecting my mother's hair, chiffon scarf forgotten, top up, blocking glimpses of Orion and the Dog Star. Or earlier in their history, another car, the Chevy with red seats and no power steering, sturdier than a tank, a testimony to chrome. Did it matter? That humid night, a corona, an unprecedented halo surrounding the moon, when my parents traveled east of Chef Mentor past the Wrigley's and the lighthouse, 90 miles to hear Ray Charles. And so the last poem that I'm going to read from this book is about one Mardi Gras after I had many Bloody Marys and mimosas. I got stuck in my costume. I couldn't get it off.
We've all been there.
So, let me get there. Green dress escapade. A hard hazard, trapped in the dress I cannot exit. The zipper jammed as any window nailed shut with the finality of a crucifixion in an infernal building once condemned, where the act of arson begins soon, surrounded by many dialects of flaming tongues, and without a chair to hurl, stuck. My arms too short, fingers unable to pinch or grasp the shiny tab, silver, ever elusive with a lift and tug, to travel the entire length of a toothy longitude, wanting to release the creasing emerald silken sea into the necessity of opposites. And so I'm going to read a few poems that are pretty new, actually. So they're uncollected, right? Liquids from childhood remembered. Rarely solidified, mystery arrived in ounces, marked like lacerations, between lethal and medicinal, tinctured with the unspoken, a scant stream of warmth, unearthed bitter roots, dulled in cramps, the utmost kept in a rusted can, dissipating skull and bones, obliterated color, volatile, sparingly applied to chamois or last winter's flannel. Behind the hinged mirrored door, uncapped viscosity, swallowed, nameless, no residual evergreen scent, yet known to steady a quivering hand. Inhaled ammonia, a shade of tarnished tears, discretion-sized in the cinched velvet pouch, reviving a mother, a daughter, sister, or aunt. Or the sweet digestive, not meant to quench a slow cadence, serene as an emerald and watered mint, served in the best blue depression glass. Ode to Snow Roses. These are not what my mother received, nearly venal in cut crystal, placed beneath a runner or doily, centered by the mirror, both real and reflected, celebrating a June birthday, a February wedding. Mine welcomed the wicked cold, a stringent wind, sawdust from the now-hewn tree. The snow roses are unfolding, losing tufts, their edges dusted in apparitional white, an emancipation in bloom. Not full, but soon they will appear the size of bandages, discarded, gauze left wadded today and thereafter from the newly healed. This poem is about a shawl that someone made for me after my mother passed away, and it's called Beginning in Persia. Its own rhythmic genesis, a pattern clicking of creation, the knitter's eyes downcast, without any chance of seeing the horizon. Epic skeins unwind to lengths of comets, slack equators. Persistent needles make loops, weave a tribe of threads, the color of melons, mums. Others offering Monet's watery palette, filaments twisted, winter camellia white, a tinge of frost, box and brioche rib, stationary windmills and squares, a geometry of pyramids and parallelograms. Successive stitches align then blend, eventually like grief, followed by acceptance, to enfold shoulders, to blanket the now of loss. And the last poem that I'm going to read, it's a sestina, and I don't write in form typically, but I find with a sestina that if you're like kind of thinking about something and it's just in your head and it keeps spinning, the sestina is kind of the perfect form for that, because it's like the sestina absorbs the obsession and the sestina becomes the obsession. So one obsession is absorbed by another. And so this is called In Unequal Seasons. And my mother's shoes shared the color of bones, her dress pale as prolific swamp flowers. A tide of pink whenever I wanted answers, going to Mrs. Greenleaf's who lived on mystery. Often I was perched with my sister on the edge after we made our way through fabric bolts and tumult. Before dusk, even the sunset brought tumult. We drove past the cemetery graves burgeoning with bones, no mountains, no hills, utter flatness. Then the edge. Unequal seasons, exponential explosions of flowers. My mother was a vault filled with mystery. Tomorrow always came with a promise of answers. Sunrise took less time than answers. The unspoken, the absent, a silent tumult. My sister knew. She didn't want the mystery. What becomes calcified isn't only bones. In bloom, always a short litany of flowers to begin again, bitten nails, uneven edges. Nothing electric. My father used edges. I sat in the doorsill, watching, wanting answers. His aftershave pungent, never smelled like flowers. That summer he left, absent rain, a drought, heated tumult. We wore sandals, shoes barely covering our bones, scarlet, mustard, blue, orchid, and plum, colors of mystery. Near the cemetery, the short street named Mystery. Anything flat and four-cornered always has an edge. Mrs. Greenleaf's house, paint decaying, faltering bones with pins in her mouth. She offered no answers, searching through buttons, notions, a tumult. The prickly lantana, rampant, she called ham and egg flowers. Another variation, always a variation of leaves and flowers, a realization, the similarity between ledge and edge, looking in apertures to see colors in tumult, beyond the park, past the church, a quick turn on mystery. My mother made the sign of the cross, kept her answers. I saw what deteriorated and remained no different than our bones. Answers never lodged close to marrow or bone, added names, recognition, flowers sprang from mystery. We felt the uncertain, then the tumult, fabric and its thread frayed edges.
Would y'all like to take some questions?
Sure. Sure. Does anybody have any questions? Any suggestions?
I have a question for you, Gina. thank you for your reading. There's a lot of energy in your poetry and very lively images. So my question is about how you maintain images, because you have a lot of associative leaps that reach far and then they come back and localize again. And so how do you tease out an image, know when to tease it out and then to bring it back and localize it?
That's a really good question. It almost seems, I think it depends on the poem itself. It almost seems like it's almost an instinctual thing, I find that I worry sometimes that I get really fixated on an image, and I think that there's like a danger to that sometimes, because I do like I love the image of kumquats, like I love the word, I love like a kumquat, and my husband will tell me not kumquats again, and so it's difficult, but I think it really kind of depends upon the poem itself, and just also kind of on the image too.
It's not a bad thing being obsessed with images. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this question is for either or both of you. When you get a seed of an idea for a poem, is it something that has been fermenting there for a while and it just simply comes out? Or is it something that you have to struggle with?
It varies. I know one time, or more than one time, I've awakened from a dream with words in my head already set out. And I just sit down and write the poem. That doesn't happen that often, but it's like sleep writing, I guess. Sleepwalking, you could have sleep eating. You could have sleep writing. You wake up and you sit down and write down what you were thinking of in your sleep. But there are things that you've been mulling over for a long time, and then all of a sudden it comes to you. I can get a poem out of this. There was a incident when I was in the hospital, and they they had a trade that came in with a special diet for me, and it said diet: liberal, mechanical, soft. And I think there got to be a poem in here somewhere. I mean, I can see that I might be liberal and I might be soft, but how the hell am I mechanical? And I figure out you'd have to be mechanical to eat the food they gave you. Things like that, you see something, or it comes to you like that. Or sometimes you think you something for years, it never occurred to you that it's a poem. Sometimes it's very easy, but most of the time for me it's a struggle. Sometimes it's easy, very easy. But,
Yeah, I think it's both. I think sometimes poems just maybe they'll come because of a dream, an image, and they'll come really quickly. But then other times not as quick, so it's really, it's just, I think, a matter of being receptive, regardless of how long it takes, or, yeah. And it seems like maybe the older I get, maybe it takes me longer to write a poem, definitely.
that's with me. Same way always. But it's easy, sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Go
do one
ahead.
more.
Sorry. No, if someone else wants to, go ahead. I can ask you after.
I was going to ask Martha, thank you for reading the RVN, which I love. Do you think you're finished with it?
Yeah, pretty much.
You think you finished? Okay, I was curious.
Yeah. Well, I have to run everything by Steve,
I know.
I harassed the poor man to death, but he's my ideal reader. So I pursue him as best I can, considering he lives in Austin, Texas, and I have to pursue him by computer. But I finally, that particular poem, right at the end, sweet, we fled there after the hurricane. We went there all the way to Austin, and I thrust the first draft upon me that it does not have any interest in me whatsoever. I knew it had to be done. So I went back and went to work on it.
No, I'm gonna ask afterwards. It's okay.
All right. Well, Gina and Martha, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a delight. And y'all want a round of applause one more time? And we have books for sale, and I'm sure they would be happy to sign them for you. So please. Yes, I did. Okay,
My name. Feel very confident in your writing.
Yeah. So